When I was helping my brother set up his new workshop last weekend, he kept asking me, do I really need another trimmer? And will this one actually keep the dust down enough that I don't end up with a cloud of mess every time I cut? He was worried about splurging on something that would sound impressive on paper, but turn out to be a hassle on the bench. That's exactly the spot I find myself in with a lot of hobbyists and small shop owners, balancing the desire for a clean cut with the fear of buying a tool that just adds more cleanup. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The Ray Foster MTD1C is a 10-inch dry model trimmer that comes with a built-in Cyclone dust collector. At first glance, it feels like the sort of device that promises to keep your workspace tidy while you tackle everything from thin sheet metal to plastic laminates. The machine measures just over 17 inches tall, with a cutting width of 5.25 inches, which puts it in the sweet spot for a benchtop unit big enough to handle decent-sized sheets, but still compact enough to fit on a crowded workbench. It runs on 110 volts, so you can plug it into a standard outlet without worrying about special wiring. If you're the kind of person who does a lot of repetitive trimming, say, a woodworker who frequently cuts MDF edges, a hobbyist building model kits, or even a DIYer who needs to trim excess veneer, this tool is designed with you in mind. The Cyclone Dust Collector is the headline feature. It pulls the particles generated by the blade straight into a sealed container, reducing the amount of airborne debris that typically clouds the air in a workshop. For anyone who has spent an afternoon wiping down a bench after a long run of cuts, that can be a real time saver. On the flip side, if you're looking for a heavy-duty industrial trimmer that can chew through thick steel, or you need a cordless solution for on-site work, the MTD1C probably isn't the best match. Its 110-volt motor is tuned for dry cutting of relatively light materials. Trying to push it through dense hardwood or thick aluminum will quickly bog it down, and the dust collector can become saturated faster than you'd like. In those scenarios, you'd be better off with a more powerful, perhaps even a wet model trimmer that can handle the load and keep the mess under control. One practical strength that shows up once you actually run the machine is how predictable the dust flow is. The Cyclone design creates a vortex that separates larger chips from finer dust, directing the bulk of the mess into a removable container. I've noticed that after a half hour of cutting-inch plywood, the container only needs to be emptied once or twice, and the bench stays relatively clean. That's a noticeable improvement over a basic trimmer with an open-air exhaust, where you'd be constantly sweeping up a fine powder that settles on every surface. A downside that isn't immediately obvious in the spec sheet is the noise level. Because the cutter and the collector share the same housing, the motor has to work a bit harder to keep the dust moving, which translates into a higher decibel rating than some comparable units. In a small garage or an apartment workshop, you'll definitely notice the whine, especially if you run the trimmer for extended periods. If you're sensitive to noise or have neighbors close by, you might want to schedule your cutting sessions for times when the sound won't be a nuisance. Another point worth mentioning is the blade change process. The MTD1C uses a standard 10-inch dry cut blade, and swapping it out is fairly straightforward. You loosen a single knob, pull the old blade out, and slide the new one in. The only hiccup is that the blade sits pretty close to the dust collector inlet, so you have to make sure the new blade is properly aligned before you tighten everything back up. If you're used to quick-release systems that let you change blades in seconds, this might feel a little more deliberate, but it's still manageable for most users. Battery life isn't a factor here because the unit plugs directly into the wall. That's a plus if you have reliable AC power at your bench, but it also means you're tied to a location. Some people have asked whether the unit could be adapted for a portable generator, and the answer is technically yes, but you'd need to make sure the generator can sustain a steady 110-volt output without voltage dips, otherwise the motor could stall mid-cut. From a value perspective, the price point sits comfortably in the mid-range for a tool that includes a dust collection system. You're not paying premium for a brand name that carries a huge markup, but you're also not getting a bargain basement unit that skips the Cyclone entirely. The 4.6-star rating from over 600 buyers suggests that most owners are satisfied, which aligns with the practical strengths we've discussed: decent cutting width, effective dust control, and a reasonably compact footprint.